Welcome back. I do not wanted you thinking about the presidents of the 50s, Eisenhower and Truman. Do you think they're better leaders than today's leaders? And hopefully you had good ideas as to why you think what you think. Um, Maybe something to reflect on as you become a voter in the next few years. Today we're going to be looking at the 1950s from perspective of like an average American. What sort of culture and technology did they experience during this time? Because the 1950s, and a lot of time in American history, we view it as sort of like this golden age where the economy was growing really strong, and people look back at it as this fond, great time. And a lot of that has to do with culture. So we're going to try to understand a little bit about the 1950s culture and how that changed American lives. So we need to remember this is a time when a lot of American soldiers are returning home from war, from World War II. Healthcare got significantly better during the 1950s, huge advances in medicine that made people healthier and live longer. A lot of children survived. We had a baby boom. A lot of people were having big families. This is where we get the term boomers from, because that generation is called the baby boomers. And here you can see the huge growth in babies. A lot of families were having like 4 or 5 kids. There's also something called the GI Bill of Rights. This was a um, plan put out by the government that helped former soldiers go back to school and to start businesses and to buy homes. And a lot of these guys who went to World War II came back and they started having a lot of prosperity, a lot of good things happening. That led to an economic boom where Americans were very wealthy during the 1950s. There's also a technology boom. Cities started growing with suburbs and cars and all sorts of stuff. All very good things for the average American. The auto industry took off. There were interstates. Technology made life easier. New military advancements. A lot of things were happening that made life easier, and it was very accessible to average Americans could afford it. Right? The house, multiple kids, cars, boats, vacations. Average Americans could afford all these things. And it led to the sort of suburban lifestyle, the average American. Right? We like to look back at it very pleasantly. Of course, when we look at different groups of people, they didn't always experience this the same. Women during the 1950s were in a weird spot because in World War II, a lot of them started working and contributing in different ways that they were never allowed to before. Um, After World War II, a lot of those women were pushed out of the workplace and back into their homes. And some women were fine with this. Some women wanted to be stay at home moms. A lot of women didn't. And this is what's going to spark a lot of women's rights movements for access to college and advancements in the workplace. Right? We don't want to pretend like racism didn't exist because it was still happening during all this time. There's still lots of sexism. But a lot of people look at the 1950s culture as being really, really good. So, this economic boom, this wealth led to a cultural boom with lots of television, music, movies, food, fashion, all that stuff. So we have a huge expansion into sports. Baseball and boxing are probably the number one and number two sports in the United States. Football's there, basketball's there, but it's not really a national thing yet. It's really baseball and boxing. Movies, there's widespread TV shows, movies being produced that really tap into the American culture. And there are only a few channels on the TV, so everyone's watching the same thing. Everyone's connected through the same culture. Here's some examples of the fashion you might see. We're going to spend a lot of time today listening to music of the 50s, is where you see lots of change, where there's just sort of new music that's younger people are really interested in, and it becomes this whole industry. So if you need to pause this video, we're going to be listening to a lot of examples of this music. We'll start with some doo-wop music. We'll have some different rock and roll with people like Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and some other different people of different backgrounds. This is Richie Valens. There's counterculture. Your assignment for today is to investigate and research culture that you're interested in and see what was going on in the 1950s when it comes to these different forms of culture.